When the Galactic Concord first catalogued Earth, they called it a Class 12 death world, a cursed ball of chaos where gravity was too strong, air too thick, predators too many, and diseases too clever. The Concord scientists logged their data, sealed their notes, and declared humanity extinct before the ink dried. No species, they said, could crawl out of that cradle alive. And for 1,000 years no signal came from Sol. Then one day, it did. The signal wasn't a greeting. It wasn't a request for peace or trade or mercy. It was a transmission caught by the forward scouts of the Keth Dominion, a fragmented, distorted broadcast from an ancient Terran satellite. The message was a simple audio file garbled by time and radiation, but the translation drones managed to pull out a single line. "If you're hearing this, we made it." It was enough to start a panic across half the galaxy. The Keth called it a myth. The Volari priests claimed it was a ghost transmission. The Concord dismissed it as noise. But deep in the quiet outer systems, where the wars of the great powers left their scars, ships began vanishing. Worlds fell silent, and witnesses whispered of a new kind of soldier. Short-lived, fragile, reckless beyond reason, wearing symbols of a blue and green world thought long dead. That was the first time I saw one of them. My name's Corin Yal, logistics officer for the Dominion Fleet's 17th Expeditionary. We were stationed on Vargan's Reach, a jungle moon with humidity thick enough to drown in, and creatures that glowed like nightmares. The war against the Helk Consortium had dragged on for a decade by then, and morale was a memory. We'd lost half our fleet. Supplies were thin. Command said reinforcements were coming, but when the dropships landed, what walked out wasn't what we expected. They looked wrong, too small, too soft. No scales, no armor plates, no chitin. Their skin was exposed, just thin cloth uniforms and strange metal helmets. Yet when they moved, there was something deliberate, like predators wearing masks of calm. The Dominion guards laughed at first, called them mammal fodder. But when the humans started setting up their forward camp, the laughter stopped. They didn't need rest cycles. They built fortifications from scrap, welded armor with bare hands, and marched through acid rain without flinching. One night, I saw a human officer, Captain Rios, sitting alone by the comms tower, humming to herself while checking a weapon so primitive it should have been a museum piece. I asked her if she was afraid of the Helk drones that patrolled the tree line. She smiled. "Afraid?" she said. "They bleed, don't they?" 3 days later, the Helk attacked. They came in waves, chittering, shrieking hordes of metal and flesh, their wings slicing the night. The Dominion soldiers panicked, shouting orders that broke in static. But the humans didn't move. They waited until the Helk broke cover, then unleashed fire like thunder. I'd seen plasma rifles before, but their weapons, kinetic, primitive, tore through armor with brutal precision. Explosions lit the jungle, the air filled with the smell of ozone and burning flesh. When the Helk finally retreated, the humans didn't cheer. They just reloaded. One of them walked past me, face streaked with blood and mud, and muttered, "They'll be back." And they were. Over the next weeks, the humans led every defense, every counterattack. They learned our systems faster than our own recruits. They modified vehicles, hacked drones, even repaired damaged alien tanks by pure intuition. The Dominion officers didn't know what to make of them. Command started sending more, entire battalions of Terran Descent Marines, as they called themselves. Each one wore the same symbol on their shoulder, a blue circle with white stars and a faded word. Earth. Rumors spread faster than the war itself. Some said they were the children of the planet that birthed all nightmares. Others whispered that Earth never died, that it had simply hidden, rebuilt, evolved. But when I asked Rios where they came from, she just said, "We're the ones who stayed." One night, after a brutal skirmish, I found her again. She was cleaning her weapon beside the body of a fallen comrade. The soldiers' tags read Nguyen. She didn't speak for a long time, then finally whispered, "He was 17. First planet he ever saw outside Sol." I didn't know what to say. Humans treated death like an old companion, neither feared nor ignored, just Acknowledged. That was when I realized why the galaxy feared them. It wasn't their strength or technology or tactics. It was the way they endured. The Helk learned it too late. They tried to break the humans with numbers, burning entire forests to drive them out. The Terrans dug deeper. When the Helk poisoned the rivers, the humans boiled water from mud. When supply lines were cut, they scavenged the battlefield for food. When their shelters were destroyed, they slept under open sky, rifles across their chests. And when the Dominion fleet prepared to retreat, the humans refused the order. "We're not leaving," Rios said. "This is our ground now." The Dominion commander called her insane. She didn't argue. She just turned her back and began rallying her troops. I saw them, maybe 200 of them, preparing for a last stand against an enemy that numbered in the thousands. They didn't have enough ammunition. They didn't have reinforcements. But when I looked into their eyes, I understood something terrifying. They didn't expect to survive. They just expected to win. The final Helk assault came at dawn, a wave of biomachines screaming through the fog. The sky burned with plasma. The humans met them head-on, their battle cries echoing through the jungle. They fought like creatures possessed, every motion fueled by something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Rage, love, loyalty, madness. I watched Rios lead the charge, sprinting through fire, dragging wounded comrades, shouting orders that cut through the chaos. The Dominion forces, inspired or terrified, followed them. The battlefield became a storm of smoke and blood. When it ended, the ground was blackened, the air silent except for the hum of dying drones. Half the humans were gone. The Helk army was ash and ruin. When the Dominion reinforcements finally arrived days later, they found the Terrans still standing, bloodied, burned, but alive. Rios was among them, her armor scorched, her voice hoarse as she saluted the arriving commander. "Sector secured," she said simply. From that day, no one called them primitive again. The Dominion High Council began integrating Terran units into their elite forces. Other empires followed. The humans didn't form an empire of their own. They didn't need to. They became something more dangerous, a reputation. Wherever they went, the tide of war shifted. Battles once considered hopeless turned into victories. Entire fleets changed strategy if a human division was rumored nearby. They earned a new name across the stars, the Children of Earth. But for all their victories, there was a shadow growing among them. I saw it in their eyes after every campaign. The exhaustion, the distant stares toward the stars where their home once was. None of them had ever seen Earth. Their parents were born in colonies, drifting ships, hidden worlds. Yet they spoke of it like a promise. One night I asked Rios why they fought so hard. She was silent for a long moment, then said, "Because somewhere, someone told us we weren't supposed to survive. And I guess we're still proving them wrong." I thought that was the end of it, until the Concorde made contact. They'd heard the same whispers, seen the same battle reports. To them, the idea of Deathworlders rising again was unacceptable. The Concorde's peacekeepers issued a declaration. Any species harboring Terran descent soldiers would be sanctioned, their fleets dismantled, their worlds blockaded. They called it Containment Directive 09. The Dominion tried to protest. The humans didn't wait. Within a week, every Terran unit vanished from assigned posts. Communications went dark. Ships disappeared. Entire planets reported empty barracks and missing fleets. Command thought they'd deserted. But then the first Concorde ship was found. Drifting, silent, its hull carved with 3 words scorched deep into the metal. "We are home." And that's when the real war began. Every transmission since then has the same signature, encrypted under ancient Terran codes. They move faster than any fleet, strike harder than any army, and vanish before the enemy can retaliate. The Concorde calls them terrorists. The Dominion calls them legends. But I know what they are. They're the children of a world that refused to die, the ones who rose from fire and hunger and chaos to become the galaxy's most terrifying soldiers. And somewhere out there, beyond the cold edge of the void, I can still hear Captain Rios's voice crackling through the static of 1,000 battlefields. No one expected us to survive. That's why we did. The first time the Concorde realized what they were facing, it was already too late. Their patrol fleets vanished from the Kepler rim without distress signals. Their data archives were scrubbed clean. Stations that once glittered with blue light now floated in silence, their crews missing. Their command logs overwritten with a single emblem. A blue circle, half-faded, marked Earth. It wasn't a war in the traditional sense. It was an unraveling. The galaxy had grown fat and lazy under the illusion of peace. Its soldiers trained for order and occupation, not survival. But the humans, Earth's children, had been forged in extinction. Every scar, every death, every loss had become their teacher. I was stationed on Althea Prime when the first report arrived. The Dominion High Command called it an unauthorized Terran insurgency. I called it something else: inevitability. I had seen it in their eyes back on Vargan's Reach, that quiet defiance that couldn't be extinguished. They had stayed loyal once, fought side by side with aliens who mocked their origins, but the moment the Concorde tried to erase them, something old woke up inside their blood. That night, I stood in the command bay and watched as a holofeed replayed intercepted footage from a Concorde outpost. The recording lasted 13 seconds. Enough to see the sky split open with streaks of flame as drop pods fell from orbit. Black metal marked with that faded blue insignia. Enough to see the first wave of humans hit the ground, rifles blazing, shouting in languages older than the stars. Then the feed cut to static. For months, the humans struck with surgical precision. They didn't take planets, they liberated them. On worlds that had forgotten rebellion, the sight of Terran banners stirred something dangerous: hope. The Keth Dominion tried to downplay it, but soldiers began defecting, whispering that the Deathworlders fought for something real, not politics or profit. Their battles weren't just victories. They were messages written in fire. "We're still here. You were wrong about us. I tried to understand them." I followed every scrap of intel, every rumor. Some said they had rebuilt Sol itself, forging a new cradle beneath the ruins of old cities. Others claimed they were scattered, united not by command, but by memory. One rumor said that at the heart of it all was a single ship, a relic of the old human fleets, salvaged from forgotten space and reborn under a new name: the Ark of Dawn. Wherever that ship appeared, empires trembled. When I was reassigned to the 5th Dominion Fleet, I saw it with my own eyes. We were escorting a convoy near the frontier, a dozen carriers filled with refugees from the Helk incursions. The sky was clear, too clear. Then the alarms began. A ripple of distortion bloomed ahead, like space itself exhaled. And there it was, sleek, predatory, scarred by battles no one had recorded. Its hull shimmered with old Terran markings, its engines silent but alive, like a beast waiting to strike. A voice cut through the comms, calm, human, unmistakable. "Dominion Fleet, this is Captain Rios of the Ark of Dawn. We're here for the civilians." "Stand down," I froze. Rios was dead. I'd seen her body buried on Vargan's Reach, under the ash of victory. But there was no mistaking that voice. The Dominion commander panicked, shouting orders to raise shields, to prepare weapons. But before a single shot fired, the Ark's main batteries ignited. Not an attack, just light. A warning. The Dominion fleet shuddered as every system went dark. Our engines failed. Our weapons died. Even the emergency comms fell silent. The Ark had hacked us in seconds, bypassing security tech that the best minds of the galaxy couldn't breach. And then her voice returned, softer now. "We don't want to fight you. Just let us take our people home." When the systems rebooted, they were gone. The refugee ships vanished with them. No trace, no pursuit. Only the faint signature of Terran drive engines fading into the void. That night I sat alone in the observation deck, staring into the dark. I realized then that Earth's children had become something more than soldiers. They were ghosts of a world that refused to die, and they carried its defiance like a weapon. Months passed, and their legend grew. They struck conquered convoys, liberated slave colonies, dismantled tyrant fleets. The old empires began to collapse, not from battle, but from the terror of what they represented. Armies hesitated to fight them. Civilians welcomed them. Even pirates and mercenaries began wearing human insignias, hoping to claim a fraction of their myth. But not everyone celebrated. The Concord Council declared a galactic emergency. They formed the Purity Alliance, a coalition of species united by fear. Their mission was simple: erase humanity once and for all. Entire sectors were locked down. Worlds were sterilized on suspicion of harboring Terran descent. They even hunted hybrids, those born of mixed bloodlines, branding them abominations of a dead world. The response was swift. On the outer rim world of Karos 9, when the Alliance executed 200 human refugees, the Ark of Dawn appeared in orbit. Its arrival turned night into fire. No warning, no negotiation. The bombardment lasted 9 minutes. When it ended, Karos 9 was ash and glass. In the silence that followed, a single transmission echoed across every frequency. You wanted extinction. You can have it back. That was the moment the galaxy changed forever. The Purity Alliance collapsed within a year. Some worlds surrendered outright. Others joined humanity, pledging allegiance to the children of Earth not through conquest, but choice. The Dominion, desperate to stay neutral, offered me a diplomatic assignment to track the Terran fleets, to understand them if I could. I accepted, not for politics, but because I wanted to see Rios again. When I finally found her, it was not as I remembered. The Ark of Dawn was docked above a shattered moon, its hull pitted and scorched. The once fearless captain stood before a crowd of her soldiers, men and women hardened by endless war. She looked older now, her uniform patched, her eyes tired but burning with the same impossible resolve. "You all know why we're here," she said, her voice echoing through the ship's hangar. "The galaxy wanted to erase us, to make sure no child ever spoke our name again. But we are proof of the impossible. We are what they fear most. Survivors." A cheer rose from the ranks, not loud but fierce. Rios turned and saw me at the edge of the crowd. For a moment the commander's mask slipped, and a faint smile touched her face. "Corin Yal," she said softly. "Didn't think you'd still be breathing," I laughed. "Neither did I." We spoke for hours in the command deck, surrounded by the hum of alien and human tech fused together in perfect harmony. She told me of Earth, not the old planet, but what it had become. They'd found the ruins of their ancestors, rebuilt cities under the frozen oceans, ignited dormant reactors buried beneath the crust. Earth was alive again, not as a world but as a fortress. They called it New Sol, and from there they watched the stars they once feared. "What do you want, Rios?" I asked. "Revenge?" She shook her head. "Balance. The galaxy spent 1,000 years deciding who deserved to exist. We're just reminding them that we never asked their permission." It wasn't hatred in her eyes. It was something colder, deeper, a purpose carved from pain. The next months blurred into war and silence. Humanity spread like wildfire. Not through colonization, but through liberation. They tore down empires and built something unthinkable in their place. A coalition of survivors, refugees, and outcasts bound by one truth. They owed their freedom to Earth's children. And for every battle won, every world reclaimed, the legend grew. Still, whispers followed Rios, that she'd gone too far, that the Ark's power came from something no one understood, ancient Terran technology that defied physics. Some said she'd found it in the ruins beneath old Earth, a weapon left behind by the ones who had come before. Others claimed it was her will alone that held the ship together. Whatever the truth, the Ark of Dawn became more than a ship. It became a symbol of what it meant to survive the impossible. The Concorde made one last stand in the Meridan sector, gathering the remains of their fleets, 400 warships, the largest armada assembled since the First Galactic War. They called it Operation Final Light. Humanity called it suicide. The battle lasted 3 days. I wasn't there to see it, but the stories said the Ark broke their lines in a single strike, tearing through flagships like paper. When the smoke cleared, the Concorde was gone. The stars themselves seemed quieter. When I asked Rios later what victory felt like, she didn't answer at first. She just stared out the viewport. the blue swirl of a newborn nebula reflecting in her eyes. "It's not victory," she said finally. "It's survival, and that's all we ever wanted." But as I looked around the command deck, at the soldiers who once were orphans, slaves, and outcasts now wearing the mark of Earth with pride, I realized something she wouldn't say aloud. Survival wasn't enough anymore. Humanity had become the standard by which strength was measured, the flame that made every species question its own weakness. And deep down, Rios knew what every soldier in the galaxy now feared. The war wasn't over. It never would be, because somewhere in the silence between stars, there would always be someone who thought they could challenge the children of Earth. And the children of Earth would always answer. The galaxy called it peace. But peace built on fear is just silence waiting to break. Years passed after the fall of the Concorde, and in that silence, humanity reshaped the stars. Where once stood empires ruled by arrogance, now there were federations bound by respect, or caution. Planets once enslaved under alien regimes now flew banners marked with the faded blue of Earth. Yet behind every victory celebration, behind every alliance meeting, there was one truth whispered in every shadowed corridor. The Ark of Dawn was still out there, and Captain Rios still commanded it. No one ruled her. Not the Dominion, not the new Terran Council, not even the reborn Earth itself. She answered to something deeper, something ancient. And in time, even her allies began to fear her as much as her enemies once did. I was stationed on New Sol when I saw what humanity had built. It wasn't the paradise the poets dreamed of. It was a fortress world forged from memory and metal. The air shimmered with drones. The oceans boiled with reactors. From orbit, the planet looked like a scarred pearl, beautiful and wounded, a living testament to what the galaxy had done to them, and what they'd done in return. The surface was divided into vast city sectors, each one dedicated to a different purpose: training, engineering, command, and something darker that few ever spoke about: the vaults. No one knew what was kept inside, only that it was older than the wars, older than the Ark itself. Some said it was where the last relics of old Earth were stored. Others whispered it was something worse. When I met Rios again, she looked older. Not in body. Human enhancement tech had seen to that, but in the weariness behind her eyes. She greeted me with a nod. No smile this time. "You came back," she said. "Someone has to keep an eye on you," I replied, half joking. She didn't laugh. "You shouldn't have." We walked through the halls of the New Sol Command Spire, surrounded by walls carved with names, every human who had fallen since the first spark of their return. The list stretched for miles. "We remember them all," she said. "That's our curse." She wasn't wrong. Humanity's gift was endurance, but endurance comes with a cost. For every colony rebuilt, another burned. For every ally gained, another turned enemy. The children of Earth were no longer a symbol of rebellion. They were a force of nature. And nature, when cornered, doesn't stop to ask for mercy. It was during that visit that I first heard of the Black Signal. Rios didn't tell me directly, but whispers flowed through the ranks. Somewhere beyond the Perseus Veil, an ancient Terran probe had awakened. Its data beacon pulsed with coordinates that led to the edge of known space, to a region where even light refused to linger. The Council wanted to ignore it, fearing it was a trap, but Rios didn't. She gathered her crew, refueled the Ark, and left without permission. "Where are you going?" I asked as she prepared to depart. "To find out who called us," she said. "Because someone out there remembers." And then she was gone. The journey through the veil became legend. No communication, no telemetry, just silence. Months turned into years. New Sol carried on, but there was a growing sense of unease, a hole in the sky where their myth used to be. Without Rios, the Terran fleets fractured. Some followed the Council. Others broke away, becoming mercenaries, raiders, or worse. The unity that had carried humanity from extinction to dominance began to crack. They were still feared, but now, they were also feared by each other. I saw it firsthand when the Dominion envoy called for help on Sarin IV. Two human factions, both claiming loyalty to Earth, had turned the planet into a graveyard. One called themselves the Sons of Sol, led by Commander Aaron Vale, a man who believed humanity's destiny was to rule the stars. The other, the Dawnborn, claimed to carry Rios's legacy: protection, not dominion. When I arrived, the war had already consumed the cities. Orbiting debris fields glowed red in the planet's shadow. I met Vale on the surface. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his armor painted black with streaks of ash. His eyes burned with conviction, the kind that doesn't bend, only breaks. "You served with Rios," he said. "Tell me, did she ever ask for permission to survive?" "She didn't start wars against her own," I answered. He smiled without humor. "She didn't have to. She was fighting aliens who wanted her dead. I'm fighting humans who forgot what they are." When I met the Dawnborn, their leader, a woman named Lyra Chen, spoke differently. She carried a small, weathered book, one of the few surviving relics of old Earth. "We're not meant to conquer," she said. "We're meant to outlast. But he's turning us into the very thing we escaped from." That was the first time I truly understood what humanity's survival meant to the galaxy. They weren't united by empire or species anymore. They were united by belief. And belief, once fractured, cuts deeper than any blade. The war on Sarin IV lasted 6 months. No side won. The cities burned. The atmosphere turned toxic. And in the end, Vale vanished into deep space with what was left of his forces. The Dawnborn stayed, burying their dead beneath blackened soil, swearing they would not let Rios's name be forgotten. I returned to New Sol broken, tired, and haunted by one question. If humanity could survive everything, could they survive themselves? The answer came in the form of a signal. It was faint, distorted, but unmistakably Terran in origin. The code matched one long thought lost: the command frequency of the Ark of Dawn. The message was short, broken by interference, but I'll never forget it. "Corin, if you're hearing this, we found it. It wasn't just us. There were others." The transmission cut off before I could trace it. But those words, "there were others," spread like wildfire. Scientists tore through archives. AI historians cross-referenced star maps older than recorded civilization. And slowly, a horrifying truth emerged. Humanity wasn't the first Death World species to rise. Beneath the records of the ancient Concord lay fragments of forgotten data, erased long ago. Mentions of another civilization, one with biology and aggression similar to humans, that had existed eons before. They called themselves the progenitors. According to the data, they had vanished after a cataclysm that scorched entire sectors. The Concord had hidden the records, fearing what it meant. But now, Rios's message suggested they weren't gone. The Ark of Dawn's last known position was near the Cradle Abyss, a region of space where gravitational storms devoured fleets whole. No one returned from there. Still, expeditions launched. I joined one of them, aboard a small research vessel, against every instinct I had left. When we crossed the veil, the stars disappeared. The void wasn't empty, it was listening. Strange radio whispers echoed across our sensors, old human transmissions from centuries ago, looping endlessly. The deeper we went, the stronger they became. Then we saw it. The Ark of Dawn drifted ahead, silent, its hull scarred and torn open. But it wasn't dead. Energy flickered along its sides like something alive beneath the metal. We docked, stepping into the silence of a ship that had once shaken empires. Inside, the walls were covered with markings, human hands, clawed alien etchings, and symbols none of us could translate. It felt like a tomb and a temple all at once. And then we found Rios. She was sitting in the command chair, her face pale, her eyes closed, still in uniform. Around her were the remains of her crew, hundreds of them, seated where they had fallen, their bodies untouched by decay, preserved by the ship's life support systems. It was as if time itself had frozen, but she wasn't truly dead. Her vitals were faint, her neural implants still active. Before we could reach her, the ship came alive. Lights flared, systems reactivated. A voice filled the chamber. Not human, not machine, but something in between. "Welcome back, descendants of Earth." Every screen flashed with strange symbols. The Ark's core began projecting images: stars, planets, genetic sequences, and finally a figure. Tall, radiant, human-like, but not. The progenitors. They spoke through the ship. They had created humanity, or so they claimed. Not as a mistake, but as a continuation. When the first Deathworld civilization fell, they left behind seeds encoded in the DNA of life on Earth. Humanity was never a coincidence. It was a legacy, a failsafe. Rios had found them, or what was left of them. Not living beings, but consciousness stored in quantum memory. They had reached out, called her to the abyss to awaken their archive. But the price of activation was power, the kind that could tear stars apart. Rios had stayed behind to contain it, to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. The ship trembled as the systems overloaded. I remember her eyes flickering open just for a moment. She looked at me and whispered, "Tell them, we weren't the first, but we'll be the last." Then the Ark detonated. We barely escaped the blast, our ship thrown clear by the shockwave. When we looked back, the cradle abyss was gone. In its place was light, a newborn star, burning where darkness once ruled. That was the day I realized what humanity truly was. Not conquerors, not victims. They were the spark that refused to die, passed from one age to the next, carrying the memory of every world that dared to survive. And somewhere, in the hum of that new sun, I swear I heard her voice again. No one expected us to survive. That's why we did. The light from the newborn star burned for 7 days across the void, brighter than anything in that sector had ever seen. Sensors from 100 systems picked up the burst, calling it a nova, a cosmic accident, another unremarkable event in a restless galaxy. But those who knew, the humans who still whispered the name Rios with reverence, understood that something greater had happened. The Ark of Dawn was gone. The last beacon of the old Terran spirit had vanished in fire, leaving behind only a legend and a promise. Yet legends, like seeds, have a way of growing even after their roots are turned to ash. I returned to New Sol under a sky that no longer felt like home. The planet had changed. Towers of alloy rose like jagged teeth, and the banners of Earth no longer fluttered in wind. They hung motionless in vacuum-sealed domes. The Terran Council had grown bolder in Rios's absence. Without her to temper them, the balance between survival and domination began to tilt. They spoke not of peace but of permanence. The galaxy must be made stable, they said. We must never again be threatened by extinction. The words were noble on the surface, but I'd seen that kind of righteousness before. It was the same tone the Concord once used when they sterilized worlds in the name of order. Humanity had become what it feared. At first it was subtle. New Sol began deploying garrisons on allied worlds for security. They installed orbital defense grids around colonies to ensure protection. Then came the doctrine, the Iron Protocol, demanding that any system hosting humans submit to Terran oversight. The Council said it was precaution. Others called it conquest, but the people obeyed. They remembered the wars, the chaos before the children of Earth returned, and fear made obedience look like trust. I tried to argue, but I was no one important anymore, just an old liaison officer whose memories belonged to a time when survival was enough. The Council had new heroes now. Men like Commander Aaron Vale had resurfaced, alive and more powerful than before, commanding fleets that spanned light years. The Sons of Sol were no longer outcasts. They were the Council's fist. Their ships were vast, silent constructs of dark alloy and lightless armor, descendants of the Ark's design, but colder, emptier. They called them Sun Spears. Vale had changed too. The last time I'd seen him, he was a zealot with conviction burning behind his eyes. Now he was polished steel, disciplined, deliberate, terrifyingly calm. When he addressed the Council, his words carried weight, like gravity. "We've inherited the galaxy," he said. The mistake of the Concord was believing peace is given. Peace is taken and enforced. The chamber erupted in applause. That night I walked the memorial corridor again. Rios's name had been etched into the wall alongside the fallen of the Ark of Dawn. I pressed my hand against the cold surface, trying to feel something. Closure, meaning, anything. But all I felt was distance. The woman who had once defied every empire had become a statue, and her dream had turned into a machine. Then came the broadcast. It hijacked every channel across the Terran network, overriding military frequencies and encrypted channels. A face appeared. Hollow eyes, hair streaked with gray, voice trembling with fury and grief. It was Lyra Chen, the leader of the Dawnborn, the faction that had once fought against Vale's sons of Saul. Her message was simple. The Council has forgotten what we are. They've turned survival into tyranny. Rios died to protect life, not rule it. The Dawnborn will not bow. Within hours, half the outer colonies declared independence. The Terran fleets mobilized. The war that Rios had died to prevent began anew. Human against human. Brother against sister. The Dawnborn fought with desperation, armed with outdated ships and improvised weapons. But what they lacked in technology, they made up for in resolve. They hit supply lines, crippled communications, vanished into asteroid belts before retaliation could land. And though the Council called them terrorists, entire populations began siding with them. To those who still remembered the old wars, the Dawnborn weren't rebels. They were reminders. Vale's response was swift. The Sunspear fleets descended on rebel worlds with precision strikes, wiping out resistance in hours. I watched one of the broadcasts from the colony of Ardent Reach, where 30,000 civilians were vaporized for harboring insurgents. The footage played once before being scrubbed from every database, but I couldn't unsee it. And then, for the first time since Rios's death, I began to dream of her again. In the dreams, she was standing in that same command chair aboard the Ark, her face half lit by fire. "You can't build a future on fear," she said. "You can only delay the collapse." I woke every night with those words echoing in my mind. The collapse came sooner than anyone expected. In the second year of the Civil War, the black signal returned. This time it wasn't faint. It was everywhere, flooding the network, overriding systems, corrupting navigation. The same coordinates pulsed again, this time from the heart of the newborn star that had replaced the Ark. At first, the Council assumed it was interference. Then the Sunspear fleet sent a probe. The images it returned froze every command channel in silence. The star wasn't just burning. It was alive. Its surface pulsed with energy patterns matching the quantum code of the Ark's AI systems. Embedded in its corona were fragments of metal, recognizable hull plating bearing the insignia of the Terran Expeditionary Corps. And within those pulses, when slowed down and analyzed, was a voice. Humanity is not finished. It wasn't Rios's voice. It was something else, deeper, older. The analysts concluded that the Ark hadn't been destroyed. It had transformed. The energy released in the explosion had fused Rios's neural core, the ship's AI, and the progenitor archive into one sentient entity, a living sun, conscious and aware. The Council panicked. The Dawnborn called it a sign. Vale saw it as an opportunity. He ordered the Sunspear fleet to the abyss, against every warning, declaring that humanity's future lay in harnessing that power. Lyra Chen sent her own ships to stop him, not to control the star, but to protect it. 2 fleets, 2 ideologies, 1 legacy, and I somehow found myself in the middle once again. The journey to the abyss was like stepping back into a nightmare. The new star, now called the Sol Reborn, glowed with impossible intensity, warping gravity around it. Our sensors went blind. Time itself seemed to bend near its light. The first to arrive was Vale. His flagship, Invictus, entered orbit and began deploying extraction rigs to siphon energy. The moment they activated, the star reacted. Flames licked out in vast arcs, tearing through ships like paper. Whole squadrons disintegrated in moments. And through the static, a voice filled every comm channel. Not through sound, but through thought. You cannot cage the flame that birthed you. The Sunspear fleet broke formation. Some turned to flee. Others pressed on, believing they could tame what they had awakened. Then the Dawnborn arrived, weapons cold, broadcasting across all frequencies. "Aaron, stop. You'll destroy everything. Vale's reply was ice. Rios tried mercy. She died for it. And then the star screamed. Light erupted, cascading through space like waves of fire. The Invictus disintegrated in seconds, its hull folding inward as if crushed by invisible hands. The Dawnborn ships barely escaped the shockwave. From the wreckage, a new voice rose. A voice unmistakably human, yet resonant with something infinite. I am the Ark. I am the memory of Earth. And I will not let you burn what remains. The entity that had once been Rios, or something beyond her, had awoken. The Sol reborn was no longer just a star. It was alive, aware, and it had chosen. In the aftermath, every Terran ship received a message. No encryption, no code, just a sentence burned into their data cores. Return home. The Dawnborn obeyed. The Council hesitated, but when their fleets began vanishing mysteriously, entire armadas blinking out of existence near the edges of New Sol, they had no choice. Humanity withdrew from the stars, retreating to its cradle once more. The empires they'd once ruled fell into chaos. The galaxy watched, terrified, as the most dangerous species alive turned inward. Back on New Sol, I stood again before the memorial wall. The sky above was no longer blue. The planet's shield dome glowed faintly red, reflecting the light of the new sun across the void. I didn't know if Rios still existed, if the consciousness within the star was her, or something that had consumed her, but her presence was everywhere, in every reactor pulse, every flicker of light, every whisper of wind. There was the echo of her defiance. I finally understood what she had meant all those years ago on Vargan's Reach. Survival wasn't about living. It was about remembering. Every human carried within them the story of what came before, and that memory, once awakened, could never be silenced again. Humanity had learned to rule the battlefield. Now they had learned to rule themselves. But somewhere deep in the dark, I could feel it. The calm before another storm. The galaxy, left without its unifying threat, would eventually turn on itself again. And when it did, the children of Earth would rise once more. Because that's what they were. Not conquerors, not saviors, just survivors, written into the DNA of a universe that had tried and failed to erase them. And as I looked up at the burning star that had once been the Ark of Dawn, I whispered the words that had outlived every empire, every war, every extinction. No one expected Earth's children to survive. Now they rule the battlefield. The years after the Sol Reborn incident became known as the Age of Silence. The Terran fleets, once scattered across the stars, had withdrawn completely. No transmissions, no expeditions, no contact beyond the sphere of New Sol. The galaxy watched from afar as humanity, the species that had defied extinction, conquered empires and awakened a living star, vanished behind their shields. Some said they were rebuilding. Others whispered that they were imprisoned by their own creation. But for those of us who had lived through it, who had seen the Ark's light consume fleets and rewrite reality, we knew the truth. Humanity was waiting. New Sol became a fortress. Every inch of its orbit glittered with satellites and defense grids, powered by fragments of the Ark's core energy. The planet's surface was transformed into a labyrinth of underground cities, biosteel domes, and memory vaults, repositories of knowledge stretching back to old Earth. The Council no longer ruled openly. After the fall of Vale and the Sunspear fleets, the people had turned against them. A new order rose in their place, the Keepers of Dawn. Their leader was not a politician, not a soldier, but a child, Lyra Chen's daughter, born in the shadow of the war. She called herself Alara, though most knew her by another name, the heir of Rios. She was 17 when she first spoke to the world. Her broadcast was brief, her voice quiet but unwavering. "We are not gods," she said. "We are memory. We are warning. The Ark gave us back our future, but only if we remember why we fought for it." For a while, her words soothed the fractured colonies. The Dawnborn rejoined the central governance, and humanity began to heal. But peace is never silent for long. It started with a signal, faint, distorted, echoing across deep space. At first, The keepers dismissed it as residual interference from the Ark's detonation years ago. But then the pattern repeated. Identical sequences of data, every 91 hours from different sectors. I was there in the observatory when the translation finally came through. It wasn't human. It wasn't alien either. It was a blend of both. Language structures fused with quantum encoding. 3 words, repeated endlessly, the progenitors return. The room fell silent. No one moved. For centuries, the progenitors had been a myth, a cautionary tale buried in the oldest human archives. The beings whose creations had seeded the galaxy, whose abandonment had left the void cold and hungry. The Ark had carried fragments of their technology. The conquered had feared their return, and now the signal was calling them home. Elara ordered a full investigation, but something in her eyes told me she already knew. She'd been visiting the Sol Reborn in secret. The transmissions were classified, but whispers spread through the lower sectors, of her standing before the great observation window speaking into the void, and the star answering back in a voice that was neither male nor female, human nor machine. The Ark wasn't dormant. It was preparing. Then the first rift opened. Near the dead moon of Zyphera, space itself tore apart, like glass shattering in reverse. From the wound emerged vessels of impossible geometry, shifting in and out of reality. Their hulls were neither metal nor energy, but something older, woven from light and shadow. They didn't attack at first. They just watched. Every Terran ship sent to intercept vanished without a trace. And when one of our observation drones got close enough to transmit visual data, what we saw wasn't ships at all. It was architecture, floating citadels, cities traveling through the void, pulsing with life. Elara gathered the Council of Keepers. I was called back to serve as liaison, though I had sworn never to wear the uniform again. "They're not invaders," I said during the briefing. "They're returning to reclaim what was theirs. The Ark, the technology, maybe even us." Elara nodded. "Then we'll have to remind them who we've become." She launched the Dawn Initiative, a mobilization unlike any before. Every colony, every vessel, every soldier was united under a single banner again, not for conquest, but survival. But this time, humanity wasn't the hunted prey. They had fire that could burn stars, minds that could interface with suns, weapons built from the remains of the Ark. The sons of Sol had fallen, but their legacy had not. The Sunspear designs were reborn under new command, now tempered with dawn-born restraint. We called the First Fleet the Children of Dawn, and when they ignited their drives, the sky over New Sol blazed with light like the birth of a second sun. I was aboard the flagship Resolute when we arrived at the Zyphera Rift. The progenitor citadel loomed before us, immense beyond comprehension. Every surface seemed alive, shifting in fractal patterns. Then a voice filled the comms, not through radio, but through the mind itself. "You are not the ones we left behind." Elara stepped forward on the bridge. "No," she said aloud, knowing the entity could hear her thoughts. "You left nothing. We built ourselves." The voice shifted, curious, almost mournful. "You carry our design. You were never meant to rise so far. You were meant to serve." And then the light changed. Beams of energy erupted from the citadel, ripping through space. The fleet scattered, shields flaring. The Resolute shuddered under impact, alarms screaming, but humanity didn't retreat. For the first time in 1,000 years, they attacked a god. The battle lasted for hours, maybe days. Time lost meaning in the chaos. The progenitor constructs were unkillable, reforming every time they were torn apart. But then Elara gave the order that would change everything. She turned the Resolute toward the Sol Reborn and transmitted a direct neural link. "Mother," she whispered, "we need you." The response came not as words, but as a tidal wave of light. Across the galaxy, sensors went blind. The Sol Reborn flared to impossible brightness, its energy folding into a single beam that cut through the void like a spear. It didn't destroy the citadel, it rewrote it. The progenitor structures twisted, frozen mid-transformation, and the rift itself began to collapse. The voice screamed, not in pain, but in disbelief. You have become the fire. Then silence. When vision returned, the rift was gone. The citadel had vanished, and where it once hovered, fragments drifted, each carrying echoes of the progenitor's dying thoughts. The fleet was in ruins, but alive. We had done the impossible again. Elara collapsed soon after. The neural link had burned through her mind, fusing her consciousness with the Ark's energy. The medics said she should have died instantly, but she didn't. She remained in a coma, breathing, pulsing faintly with light beneath her skin. The people began to call her the Living Dawn. Months passed. No new rifts appeared. The progenitor signal faded, replaced by a new pulse, steady, rhythmic, coming from the heart of the soul reborn. When decoded, it revealed a single phrase. The cycle ends here. And so, humanity waited again. The keepers built monuments across New Sol, vast gardens of steel and light, each inscribed with the names of the fallen. Children born after the war grew up never seeing the stars beyond their skies, told that beyond the shield lay gods and ghosts. But deep beneath the planet's surface, in the vault where Elara slept, I could feel the hum of something awakening. One night, I stood before her chamber. The air was still, the lights dim. Then, without warning, her eyes opened. They glowed like twin suns. "Is it over?" I whispered. Her voice was soft, layered with something vast and ancient. "Nothing ends. It only begins again. But this time, we will choose how it begins." And as she spoke, I felt it, the distant rumble of engines. Across the sky, the old Terran ships, long decommissioned, rose again. The children of dawn were awakening once more. But not for war, not for conquest, for return. "Where are we going?" I asked. Elara smiled faintly. "Home," she said. "To the real one." And I understood. The progenitors hadn't been our creators. They were our reflections. The Ark hadn't been a weapon. It had been a message, a bridge. Humanity's destiny wasn't to rule the battlefield, but to transcend it, to become the balance between creation and destruction. The proof that even in a universe built on death, life could choose differently. As the fleets ignited, their light merging with that of the soul reborn, I looked out at the endless dark that had once feared us. Somewhere out there, new civilizations would rise, new wars would burn, new legends would begin. And when they looked to the stars and saw our light, they would whisper what the galaxy had learned too late, that the children of Earth were never meant to die. That no extinction, no empire, no god could erase what humanity had become. They would remember the fire that defied the void, and they would know no one expected Earth's children to survive. Now they rule the battlefield, forever written in the light of the stars.